I'm César Ferreira from the Department of Spanish and Portuguese at UWM. I'm here with the Cuban poet José Kozer, and he is participating in the symposium on Jewish Latin American writers on our campus. José, what is the importance of Jewish Latin American writing and your poetry, to be more specific, within that context?
I'm a Jew by birth, and I'm willing to remain a Jew as long as I can be a Jew in my own terms, by which I mean as long as I can be open to many other things that in a sense participates of Judaism as an open religion, as an open vocation, and as an ethos that is open to anything and everything. I am a voracious person, my mind is voracious, and thus, if I seclude myself as a poet into Judaism as theme, as need, as desire, I am harming my poetry. And I refuse to harm my poetry at the expense of anything under the sun. Thus, Judaism is an aspect of my poetry which I have used willingly, possibly will keep on using until the day I die, but it does not exclude other forms of expression. Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, being Cuban, which I am, and that is as strong in my case as being a Jew, participate of that poetry. Being a Cuban in exile participates of that poetry. Being a male who has female forms, or a female that has male forms, participates of a poetry that is somewhat androgynous at many levels. By which I mean that, to me, Judaism is not a monolithic religion or a monolithic way of behavior or a monolithic way of being, but rather the opposite. It is a pluralistic, open form to deal with reality and thus with poetry. If I stay within Judaism, I think I am making a disservice to Judaism and to my poetry. If I remain open to other forms of expression as a poet, I think I am doing a service to both Judaism and my poetry. I hope I'm being clear in what I'm saying, and that this does not lead to any form of misunderstanding. But what I am aiming at is the expression of a very heterodox form of Judaism in which I believe, and not a form of orthodoxy that, in terms of religion, can well work for certain people, but in terms of poetry and the basic meaning of poetry, which is openness in a highly democratic and mysterious manner, it would spoil the poet. Now, there are writers within the Jewish tradition, not only in Latin America or Spain, that is to say in the Spanish language, but in other languages that are easily classified as Jewish writers. Take Bashevis Singer, or take Agnon. They would not be unwilling to say, I am a Jewish writer. I am willing to say I am a Jewish writer partially. That is to say, I have used forms of Judaism, basically the Bible, which is a source of literature for me, more than a source of religion, throughout my work. I have books, for instance, like Carece de Causa, which is a purely Jewish book. Yet, it is not the only book or the only form of dealing with poetry that I have used. So that what I'm looking for is that ecumenical space in which I think Judaism really fits, in which I think Judaism has always prospered, because after all, we are the people of the book. The book with a capital B implies that all books fit into this book. It's like the dream of Mallarmé. He wanted to have one book for all the poetry of the universe, let's say. Well, that book is not monolithic because it contains all the other books that the world has produced. This is the same scope I have in mind when I say the book as the Bible, but the book as the book that contains all the books. Thus, this wide range, this huge scope of perception is how I define my Judaism. It is clear, it is in my soul, it is part of my being. I never would deny, not under the worst circumstances. I would have not denied being a Jew and a circumcised Jew in Nazi Germany. I would never deny the Judaism in me, but neither would I make out of that Judaism a business, an opportunistic situation, or anything that excludes other forms of understanding of reality. I think this is for the benefit of that which I love the most, which is poetry.
Thank you for your thoughts, Jose, and welcome to WM.
Thank you.